Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Taylor and today is the August reading wrap-up. So I think I finished 17 books in the month of August. It was a very big reading month. I hadn't anticipated that. I think just because I was traveling and moving and just a ton of driving. So before we get started, don't forget to like this video. Let me know what you're reading down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As you can see, I have moved. You can't see all of my paintings here, but I do kind of want to do an apartment tour soon. I am so happy with the way our place has just come together, and I really want to show it to you guys. But with all of that out of the way, let's just hop in. The first book I read was The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. This book follows Georgia, and she is coming back to her small South Carolina town. Yeah, South Carolina town after the abrupt death of her father. It is her first time being back in the United States since being shipped off by her family when she was 15 years old. Her family is very like old money, bless your heart type of Southern, and so it's like her and her three siblings. So it's like two girls, two boys, and it's a lot about like family dynamics and struggles and who knows the truth, who gets to know the truth. All of these things. I really liked it. I think Jessa Hastings, I think this sort of book where there is a romance B plot, and I do think that the B plot is done also very well. I was so into this book. I really liked it. So yeah, this was a 5-star read for me actually, and I haven't had a 5 stars in a while. So. Next was The Employees by Olga Ravin. So this is a sci-fi sort of space book. I would not call it a novel. I don't even think the book would categorize itself as a novel, a novella, but it's a bind-up of statements from employees on a starship. And we don't know who is giving these statements, but essentially it's like there's humans, humanoids, and like robots, and it's exploring like what is being a human, work-life balance, because they're all on this spaceship and they just do their little daily tasks, and then in their free time they can go like look at these weird objects that they found on a different planet. So really interesting. This book was actually a companion to an art exhibit. Like in the dedication it says, "With thanks to Leah Goldite Hestelund for her installations in sculptures without which this book would not exist." And I got this in Chicago from Exile in Bookville, and it is translated from, it was originally published in Danish. So I thought that this was fun, really cool, just kind of makes you think. It is not really like a plot or a story, it really is just vibes. So if you have an hour, 2 hours maybe, just sit down, vibe out with this for a bit, and just contemplate life. The next book is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This book is exactly what I wished like The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt was. And the books themselves, they do not have similar premises, but I saw a review on The Goldfinch on Goodreads, and it was like, this is quintessential reading. Like, this is what reading is supposed to be. And I if you watched, you know, my June and July wrap up, I just did not feel that way about The Goldfinch, and that's fine. But that's how I feel about this book. This book is what reading is. It is this beautiful story set in Barcelona in 1945, and we are following Daniel as his dad brings him to the Library of Forgotten Books, and he finds a book called The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Carax. And at 10 years old, he is like, this is the best book ever written. I need to read more by Julian Carax. And he can't find it. Where are more books written by this man? And it brings him to these other people who want to buy the book from him because they also want to read more by Julian Carax. Other people who have found one-offs of his other books that are like, we're trying to figure out who is Julian Carax, what is the story of this man, and as we're piecing these things together, it's gothic and it's so good. And Daniel is just a very compelling character in the way he, him and his father interact, and they're like the side characters in this book are super, super good. Like, I want to read more of Carlos Ruiz Zafón's writing. Apparently this Library of Forgotten Books is like a whole series. I think the next one is called like The Angel's Game, and I'm ready and excited to read that next book. The next book I read was No Longer Human by Junji Ito. So this book is a manga adaptation of a memoir-esque novel by another man. And this is not like regular Junji Ito. Like, if you've read a lot of Junji Ito, this is nothing like what he's written in the past. This is also like a 600-page manga. And I really did not like this. I did give it like 2 stars on Fable and Goodreads. I think that it was just like really hard to follow. Maybe it was more for people who liked the original novel and wanted to see it in a different context. I just had a hard time like understanding the motives behind our main character. It's essentially, it starts when he's a kid, and he talks about like his social anxiety and how bad that is, and how he almost doesn't feel human, or it's either he doesn't feel human or the people around him aren't human, and he can't tell the difference between the two. And just the way in which he like is kind of a crappy person, and I don't think that the book tries to say that he's like a good person in any way, but I understand that it was probably supposed to be like commentary on something, and I think it just went over my head. Next book is House Fires by Connor Franta. This is a mix of poetry, of photography, and essays by Connor Franta, and a lot of it is about mental health, growing up, kind of, getting into your late 20s, falling in love again, or will I ever fall in love again. I thought that this was just kind of a comfort read. I really want to revisit Note to Self, because I don't know if it's just me moving away from poetry, but like I've loved poetry for many, many years now, and I have another poetry collection, and I don't know if it's just the style in which poetry that gets published nowadays, or if it's me. As I've said before, and I will probably say a million more times, I'm a speech coach, and one of the categories that students can compete in is poetry. I love the way that poetry is delivered. I think that it is beautiful. And here's the thing too, like, I was reading Paradise Lost by John Milton this month. I did have to like put it down for a bit because the audiobook lapsed, and I do feel like I need the audiobook for that book. It is an epic poem, and that basically just means that it's really long, and it, like, the Odyssey and the Iliad, those are epic poems, and so I don't know why this just did not resonate with me a whole lot, but I love the way that this book just kind of like exists with its poetry and its essays, but I just didn't feel like it went deep enough. Next is TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking by Chris Anderson. And I liked this book. I think it's good for what it is. If you are ever interested in giving a TED Talk, I do think that like kind of brushing up on something like this would be good for you. I specifically picked up this book to help in my coaching of original oratory, which is persuasive speaking in a speech sense. As you can see, I have a few little post-its here, but I do feel like overall I didn't need to completely read this book, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good reference to have. It goes over things like how to choose a topic, what should you wear, what kind of visual aids should you use, things to sort of avoid, and talking styles and speeds and all that sort of stuff. So I do think like overall for public speaking this is really good. Next is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is kind of the like it book for Kristen Hanna. I remember people talking about this book a ton and not really understanding what this book was about, so I'm gonna tell you what it's about if anyone else has been super vague as to should you or should you not read this. So this book takes place in Nazi-occupied France. We're following two sisters. one who is 19 years old and wants to join the resistance, fight the Nazis, and the other sister lives right outside of Paris, and her husband is off fighting the Nazis, and she has when the book starts, her daughter is 6 years old, and she's a teacher at the local school. So when the war, like when Germany takes over France, the younger sister has to go to the older sister's house, live with her for a bit. And, you know, it's obviously really difficult when you're being occupied by Nazis and you have someone who is adamantly opposing them, and anyone who's like opposing them gets, you know, murked. And so the older sister is like, we just have to get through this, like, we have to live our regular lives, I need to keep my daughter alive, like, how am I supposed to do this? And the younger sister is like, how can you just sit by? I think it really shows the dichotomy of people and why they make the choices that they do, and like, what are your choices worth, and how much do you have to give up for it to be enough? Like, how much is enough when at the bottom line you're doing a good thing? I thought this book was good. I don't think it's revolutionary. A lot of people are like, oh my god, best book I've ever read. I do think in terms of historical fiction it was quite good. I do think I preferred The Four Winds though, and I'm interested to see what I think of Kristen Hanna's other works, but I can see why this one really kind of like put her name on the map. Next is Time Will Tell by Courtney Peppernill. And this book is a poetry collection about coming back after heartbreak, if I understand correctly. And essentially, like, she's been doing these little, like, garden spirits things for a bit. And honestly, I'm not vibing with it. I have a few books of Courtney Peppernill's, and I used to think I liked her writing and all this stuff, but I like the artwork, but I do think I might get rid of this book. I just think that it's like palatable poetry, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a time and a place, but I do feel like I have outgrown this form of poetry. Next, I read Love Sickness by Junji Ito, and this one was really cool. So this one was still a short story collection, but one of the short stories took up pretty much the an entire half of the book, and it's called Love Sickness. And it is about a fictional town where people do crossroads fortunes. So they like cover their face and they have to ask like a question of the first person who walks by. So like you're at a T intersection, right? So you're here and someone's walking by, first person that walks by, it's like, will I ever find love? And then someone's supposed to be like, yeah, just like keep your heart open or something like that. But some people are kind of mean and they're like, no, you're gonna die alone. And that's kind of the premise of it, and like the chaos that ensues from it. And I thought it was really good. I think Junji Ito should do like more like longer form stuff. I think that this one was just like really interesting, and it really captivated me in a way that some of his other short story collections just haven't. And I do think it's because he has more room to play, like just more pages. I think a lot of his stories could benefit from more pages. Next is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. I did listen to this on audiobook. It is the fourth book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. My goodness, it is between Camille and Dusty, and it's a second chance romance. She's a single mom. Yeah, I think too, because you just know that they have a history, and like you see a little bit of it, but you also see why they didn't work out the first time. It just, I don't know what it was. This one just like really fell flat for me. That's not to say that it won't fall flat for other people. I really liked the first one, Done and Dusted. I think that Lila Sage really like hit the ground running with that first book, and then the rest of the series just felt lackluster to me. And that's just my opinion. That's not to say that, like, if you're looking for a fluffy, fun cowboy romance, absolutely, like, go for Lila Sage or an Elsie Silver. So, you know, time and place and all that jazz. Next is American Bulk, Essays on Excess by Emily Mester. I do think that this book is more memoir rather than essays. I think that it has some very profound statements about how we always want more or how we just like accumulate crap in our lives, but a lot of it is centered around Emily's family and basically like critiquing her grandma and how her grandma had too much stuff in her house and how her dad has too much stuff for his house but he has the money to store it, and is that okay, and all this sort of stuff. And I still thought it was really, really good. I remember thinking at the time like, oh my god, this is so good, but now when I'm thinking back on it, telling it to you guys, I'm like, I wish it had been more about like American consumption. But I do think when she comes from like a Midwestern background like myself, I do think that like we shared like a sort of kindred spirit sort of thing on that. But yeah, I think that this is really interesting if you're wanting to read about overconsumption in the very individual sense, like how it can affect people's family. Next is It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. So this book is about the United States falling into fascism and how Remus Jessup, a journalist, kind of tries to fight back against him. And it's so funny. It is a satirical book, but essentially the United States votes in a whack job, and immediately he starts redrawing state lines, and he has his own militia called the Minutemen. And this was originally published in 1935, and it does talk about Hitler a little bit, but not a ton. It's basically like America needs what Germany has right now with the Nazis and Hitler and all this stuff. And from my research, and I could be completely wrong, but from what I did read online, this book was published before the world knew the atrocities that the Nazis were committing. That's not, I don't think Sinclair Lewis liked Hitler. I mean, like I said, this is a satirical thing, and our main character, Remus Jessup, he is fighting against like the Minutemen and this tyrannical government, and he like, all these other characters are like, yeah, you know, we should be like them. And he's like, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? So I thought that this was good. I do think it was a little long, very heavy-handed, very on the nose. You know how some people are like, oh my god, the art of subtlety is lost by modern books. This was published in 1935, and it is the least subtle thing I think I've ever read. But I still think it was really good. I do want to, like, go back to it at some point. It just, yeah. It can happen here. Next is Becoming Free Indeed by Ginger Wolo Duggar. So this is a book written by one of the Duggar children. If you watched like 19 Kids and Counting, I grew up with my mother watching that on TLC a lot. And this book is not a tell-all. This is not her condemning the actions of her family members or her parents. She's basically like, yeah, I don't believe these things anymore, but my family's still great. And it's like, you know what? If she doesn't want to talk about it, she doesn't want to talk about it. So the reason why it's called Becoming Free Indeed is because apparently there was a forum online called like Free Ginger Duggar, and so she's playing on the like, I am free because I have Jesus. And I don't talk a ton of religious things on this channel, but I have been feeling myself called towards like religious fanfic in a way, and let me explain. I've really been wanting to read The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. That someone said, I read online, someone was like, that's like Catholic fanfic. And Paradise Lost by John Milton, that's about the fall of the Garden of Eden, and it's told by like Satan. And I just bought a copy of East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and that one is like Eden-esque and like Cain and Abel. And I think it's just interesting reading about different people's perspective of Christianity and the Bible. And so one thing that Ginger talks about in this book is she denounces a lot of ILB practices, the Institute of Basic Life Principles, and how the former guy who ran that really pushed a lot of harmful and negative things. So I do like that she's talking about it and how, you know, she was able to untangle her faith from these very toxic things, and how her husband helped her do that, how her brother-in-law helped her do that, and, you know, how it's helped her become a better person who can truly, like, in her eyes, like, serve the Lord and all that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it was quite a good book in my opinion. Next is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I did read The Maidens by him a couple years ago, and I was just like not impressed by that book. I'm not sure what it was. It just like didn't click with me. But The Silent Patient, oh, this book was so good. Such a beautifully laid out thriller. We are from the point of view of a therapist, and he is treating a woman who killed her husband, and then she just goes mute, won't talk. So he's like, I'm gonna get her to talk. And that's where I'm gonna leave you, because so much happens, I don't want to like tell you anymore. Next is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, and the tagline on this one is A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. So this book was so good. You know how some people are like, oh, redlining doesn't exist anymore. Why are we still talking about racism and slavery? Those things don't exist anymore. The way that our government failed Reconstruction and then just continued to fail African Americans and people of color since the emancipation of the slaves is absolutely wild to me. And so this book talks specifically about so many instances in which the government ruled that it was constitutional to discriminate based on race, based on the amount of money that you could make, based on all of these things, but most of it comes down to people of color. So for example, if a family of color had enough money to buy a house in a predominantly white area, I'm sure we have all heard of white flight, but stay with me here. So if a family of color purchases a house in a predominantly white suburban area, their white neighbors would band together and basically be like, you can't sell to the former house owners, you can't sell to like African Americans, that's illegal. And they would take that to court, and the court would be like, yeah, you're right, you can't sell to African American people. And that's why so many of our suburbs in the United States are so predominantly white. And that's why when people are like, oh, HOAs are racist. Yeah, because HOAs existed to keep black people from buying houses in those neighborhoods. And it's like, I don't question when, you know, people of color are like, oh, this is that. And I'm like, oh yeah, you probably know more than I do. I'm not gonna question you. But like then reading an entire book about all of these things, I'm like, oh my god, all this like context. Because like I do think that it is my job to go and learn things, not for my friends of color to educate me. Next is Rent a Girlfriend, Volume 1 by Riji Miyahima. And I was thinking about purchasing this book when I was at the manga shop in Chicago, and honestly I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I just checked it out from the library. I was so like, it was so middle of the road, so mid, and it's just about this guy whose girlfriend broke up with him, and then he rents a girlfriend, and we find out later in the book that like he was really creepy towards his like former girlfriend, and the rent-a-girlfriend comes to his aid and is like, you don't understand him, like he's actually a really good guy. But like the former girlfriend is like, yeah, you used to pressure me to be physical with you and da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, like I could already tell that this guy was a POS, but I'm like, oh, you're a real POS, huh? So I don't know, I don't think I can in good faith like continue with this. Like a lot of mangas go on for like 50 volumes or something, and I'm like, you know what, I'm okay. I don't need to read any more of this, so thank you, goodbye, you know. Next is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and let me tell you, this is my Emily Henry book. This is my Emily Henry book. I know that some people will be like, oh, you just need to, you know, everyone's got their one. This is my one. There's one thing I love in a book, specifically like a romance book. It is a woman who is so stone cold that people think she is unfeeling. Like Reckless from the L.C. Silver, like Chestnut Spring series was my favorite. Nora. I love a career woman, and the prologue of this book is so funny in the way that it is like the antithesis of Hallmark movies, and how the guy is also like, they just complement each other so well, and how they want this like life together. I do think that that Emily Henry kind of like drug out the like, oh, kind of like the third act breakup, in my opinion. But I still loved this book, and it made me cry like a lot. Like, I was putting away my jewelry in our new apartment here, and I like just start crying, and my boyfriend's like, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm like, it's mine. So, very good book. I want to read more of Emily Henry, but I just, you know, this is my Emily Henry book. This is the one that I'm like, yeah, I like this one. Everything else is gonna be downhill from here. This last book, I actually listened to the audiobook, and I bought it at Barnes & Noble this past weekend because I needed to have a copy of this book. This is White Rural Rage: The Threat to American Democracy by Tim Schaller and Paul Waldman. This book was so revolutionary and profound, and put into words so many things that I have been like thinking about when it comes to like rural America, and like living in Minnesota and coming from a suburban area, and like living in South Dakota, which is mostly rural. Even though I lived in the largest city in South Dakota, like the people there are rural. It's a very rural mindset. This book is so good. It talks about how a lot of people of rural areas are taught to hate people who aren't like them, and how they are considered to be like quintessential Americans in a way. And it also talks about like the virtue signaling that they do. Like, there's an entire section in this book about how trucks are marketed for rural men in particular, and the performative masculinity of that, of how talk radio really gets into people's heads and teaches them to hate based on things that are not true. So, like, the kind of top thing on the back says, a searing portrait and damning takedown of America's proudest citizens who are also least likely to defend its core principles. And just really the dichotomy of that. I really recommend anybody who kind of just wants to learn more about rural America and maybe just like see things through this lens. One thing that I really took away from this book was a lot of people in rural America will vote in Republican lawmakers just based on the fact that they told you, they like whipped up your emotions for a culture war, essentially. But when these people get into office, they do nothing to help their constituents. And even in the back of the book it says, like, it's not that they all have to turn blue, they could just elect Republicans that do their job, because rural America is dying because the people who live there keep electing people who do not care about their best interests. They say, we care about rural America is the best among us, and yet they do nothing to like make their small towns better, to help with the tourism, to lessen the brain drain of these areas. And I knew I wanted to have a copy of this book. I know I'm going to be going back to this book again and again. Those are all the books I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below what you have been reading. I would love to know. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!